You know, one thing we hear in the gun community quite often is that MIM parts, or metal injection molded parts, suck. And you know who says this? Morons. That's who says this. You know, I think the people that say that MIM parts suck are the same kind of people that when you ask, hey, what color grip should I put on my gun, are the ones that come on there and go, it doesn't matter what color they are, it's your gun, all it matters is that it works. You know, they say that because they think it makes them seem tactical. And I have this feeling that they think saying MIM parts suck make them seem like they know something about metallurgy or gun manufacturing, which they don't. Now, MIM parts can suck if they're not made properly, but so can anything. If you buy a Raven Arms gun and it's got MIM parts and they suck, well, it's not because they're MIM, it's because it's Raven Arms. Buy a better gun. One thing that I find extremely funny is when people say, oh, MIM parts suck, they're just not strong enough, they won't last long enough. And then they tout their Glock, their plastic gun. You know, and I know people go like, oh, it's polymer, not plastic. Glocks and guns like that are usually made out of nylon-based materials like Zytel, which is a thermoplastic. So get over yourself, you're carrying a plastic gun. So I find it extremely funny that someone would say, well, it's okay that if a trigger is made out of plastic, or a trigger housing is made out of plastic, or a mag release is made out of plastic, but not MIM. MIM, that's not any good. The reality of MIM parts is that they're just about as strong as a forged part of the same size and shape. In fact, usually they range at about 98% of the same strength and impact resistance as a forged piece of the same metal of the same size and shape, like I said before. The biggest reason that MIM parts are great is because they're so much easier to produce. They are so much easier to make, especially if they're small, intricate pieces, than pieces made through regular casting methods or through forging. And plus, once they're made, once they come out of the molds, they're pretty much ready to go. You just have to properly harden them. You don't have to do any final finishing on them. It saves a lot of manpower hours and a lot of production hours, so it just makes it a lot cheaper to make that same piece. And like we've already said, they're just about as strong as a forged piece of steel of the same size and shape, so they are suitable for a lot of applications. Let's say you have a scale of 1 to 100 as far as the toughness of a piece is. Let's just make it really simple. And there's a part in a gun that has to be a 50 for it to last the entire lifetime of that gun to do its job properly as long as that gun will last. So we say that part has to be a 50 on the scale of 1 to 100 to do its job. Well, the forged piece, let's say it's going to be 100. It's going to be as hard as it can possibly be. Well, the MIM piece, depending on how it's heat treated, is going to be between an 85 and a 95, maybe even a 98. So as you can see, both of those parts are going to far exceed the requirements for that piece. Both of those little pieces, the forged one and the MIM one, are going to outlast that gun. They're going to outlast the total mechanism of that gun, so they're not going to make any difference whether they're forged or MIM. The biggest difference is going to be the forged piece would add $40 to the price of the gun, whereas the MIM piece would add $4 to the price of the gun. And which one of those would you choose if you're the one paying for the gun? Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, the MIM parts aren't keeping the prices down. They're so much higher nowadays than they used to be, so they must just be pocketing that extra money. Well, that's not true. If you look at the price of guns back in the 1960s and compare it to the prices now, taking inflation into account, it's about the same. A J-frame that cost like $45, $50 back in 1960 costs about the same today in today's money with inflation taken into account. And then when you take into account that the cost of domestic manufacturing has outpaced inflation, the guns should actually be more expensive than they are now. But they're not. They basically just kept up with inflation, which means when you take manufacturing costs into effect, they're actually cheaper now than they used to be, or they're at least cheaper than they should be. And MIM parts are one of the main reasons that guns can still be about the same price now as they used to be, even though manufacturing costs have really gone up, especially for a domestic product like a Smith & Wesson. So when you take all that into account and you know that a well-manufactured MIM part, when used properly and appropriately, will work just as well and last just as long as a forged part, but cost a lot less money, I know what I'll say. I want to pay less for the gun, so I'll take that small MIM part and I won't complain about it.